As bombs reduced cities to rubble and chaos consumed the streets, ordinary Germans turned to desperate, forgotten survival techniques to stay alive. Let's uncover 25 ingenious wartime tricks hidden beneath the ruins of history. We start by taking a look at a section on structural and shelter tactics. With this, let's take a look at our first survival technique, basement interconnection. As Allied bombs leveled German cities, survival depended on the ingenious strategy of basement interconnection, or Mauerdurchbrüche. Recognizing the standard exits would inevitably be buried under mountain-high rubble, families proactively chipped away structural bricks between shared basement walls. This created a continuous covert network of underground escape tunnels running beneath entire city blocks. When the building collapsed above, residents simply crawled through these improvised breaches into adjacent safe cellars to escape the suffocating debris. This hidden subterranean labyrinth fundamentally transformed private basements into shared lifelines, epitomizing the desperate community organization required to survive total urban annihilation. Moving on, let's take a look at the next technique, which was the debris baffling. Amid the terrifying fury of World War II air raids, debris baffling emerged as a vital architectural defense for civilians trapped underground. When high-explosive bombs detonated nearby, the lethal blast waves and flying shrapnel easily penetrated straight through the basement windows. To counter this, citizens constructed improvised staggered barriers or baffles using heavy timber, sandbags, and loose rubble directly outside cellar openings. This zigzag configuration forced the concussive pressure and destructive debris to bend around sharp corners, radically dissipating its kinetic energy. By deflecting the deadly air displacement away from the shelter's core, this primitive physics trick kept the cellar air pockets intact and saved countless lives. On to the next survival technique, let's take a look at emergency water basins. When Allied bombing campaigns severed municipal grids, urban centers faced a secondary catastrophic threat: uncontrollable firestorms. In response, German civilians engineered emergency water basins, or Löschwasserbecken, directly within public squares and cratered streets. Rather than relying on destroyed subterranean pipes, communities lined massive bomb craters or improvised brick enclosures with clay and tarps to trap precious rainwater. These ad hoc urban reservoirs provided an immediate, localized supply for bucket brigades battling spreading phosphorus fires. By transforming the very scars of bombardment into vital lifelines, these primitive basins kept apocalyptic blazes at bay and preserved humanity amid the ashes. Still on structural and shelter, let's take a look at smothering agents. During the devastating air raids on German cities, Allied incendiary bombs introduced a terrifying form of chemical warfare. Standard firefighting methods often failed against magnesium or phosphorus, which reacted violently with water. Survival necessitated the use of primitive yet effective smothering agents. Residents kept buckets of dry sand, heavy soil, and thick wool blankets readily available in hallways and attics. By quickly covering the hissing canisters, civilians starved the intense flames of oxygen. This desperate mastery of basic physical principles prevented individual fires from merging into uncontrollable firestorms, turning ordinary citizens into essential guardians of their remaining urban architecture. Finalizing this sector, let's take a look at the fifth survival technique, chimney bypasses. During the devastating firestorms in wartime German cities, standard chimneys often became lethal hazards as upper floors collapsed, blocking traditional flues. To prevent suffocation in basement shelters, civilians developed improvised chimney bypasses. This technique involved rerouting stovepipes through foundation walls or rubble fields to ensure smoke and toxic gases escaped subterranean spaces. This desperate engineering allowed families to burn scavenged fuel for warmth and cooking without succumbing to carbon monoxide poisoning while trapped beneath debris. Today, these ad hoc venting methods remain a somber testament to human ingenuity and the extreme measures required for survival during urban aerial warfare. Moving on, we take a look at another sector in water and sanitation as we take a look at the next technique, rubble filtration. In the aftermath of air raids on German cities, the collapse of municipal water systems created a desperate need for clean hydration. Amidst the debris, civilians had to navigate a landscape where water sources were often compromised by the effects of heavy bombardment. Historical accounts suggest that survivability frequently depended on the ability to find or adapt whatever materials were at hand to strain out heavy particulates from turbid water sources. This era of extreme hardship highlighted the limits of urban resilience, as individuals sought any means to obtain water that could be further treated for survival. Now, let's have a view on rain tarp catchments as our next technique. When relentless aerial bombardments shattered municipal water grids, surviving civilians faced a desperate race against dehydration. Amidst the dusty ruins, communities looked to the sky, deploying improvised rain tarp catchments to secure clean water. Residents stretched heavy canvas tarps, oilcloths, and salvaged drapery across bomb craters or propped them beneath fractured roof gutters. These makeshift funnels channeled pure rainwater away from contaminated ground rubble directly into buckets and shell casings. By transforming the very climate into an immediate, decentralized lifeline, this simple atmospheric harvesting technique sustained thousands of trapped families when the earth below offered only ash and ruin. On our 8th survival technique, let's have a look at condensation traps. Trapped deep within suffocating basement shelters beneath burning German cities, civilians often faced total isolation from external water sources. To combat fatal dehydration without risking the firestorms above, survivors engineered primitive condensation traps. By hanging cold metal sheets, salvaged glass panes, or damp cloths near underground vents or steaming rubble, they captured the heavy humidity generated by heat and human respiration. This rising vapor cooled against these surfaces, condensing into precious droplets of pure distilled water that trickled into makeshift cups. This brilliant thermodynamic improvisation extracted life directly from the air, sustaining families buried alive beneath the ruins. Moving on, let's take a look at the next technique, charcoal tablets. Amid the devastation of bombed German cities, charcoal tablets represented a vital link to primitive survival methods. As infrastructure collapsed and resources vanished, civilians looked toward the natural properties of carbon to address critical needs. Historically, charcoal was recognized for its porous nature, which survivors utilized in makeshift filtration systems to help manage the hazards of contaminated environments. These tablets became symbols of resourcefulness in urban ruins, showcasing how traditional knowledge was repurposed under extreme duress. Understanding these historical survival techniques provides a window into the resilience of populations navigating the immense challenges of post-war recovery and public health preservation. Our 10th survival technique that was used during the dark days was sanitation trenches. When relentless air raids pulverized municipal sewage networks, bombed German cities faced a silent, lethal enemy: rapid disease outbreak. To prevent catastrophic epidemics of typhus and cholera amid the ruins, civilians dug strictly regulated sanitation trenches in public parks and bomb craters. These deep, narrow latrines were strategically managed with layers of earth and pulverized building ash, which acted as a makeshift desiccant and deodorizer. By enforcing rigid, military-style hygiene protocols in the middle of urban chaos, citizens neutralized biological hazards. This grim but vital improvisation proved that survival required managing waste as rigorously as dodging falling bombs. On to the next sector of survival in heat and light, let's take a look at the Kachel heater. As freezing winters gripped devastated German cities, the traditional ceramic tile stove, or Kachelofen, was repurposed into a vital tool for survival. When bombing raids severed gas and electric lines, civilians carefully dismantled damaged stoves to salvage the heavy, heat-retaining ceramic tiles, Kacheln. Survivors reassembled these into compact, improvised basement heaters or placed the individual tiles directly into small brick fireboxes. Due to their dense composition, these tiles absorbed the intense heat of minimal scavenged wood scraps and radiated warmth for hours after the fire died. This thermal efficiency kept families alive in freezing subterranean ruins. Onto the light survival part, let's take a look at sludge lamps. In the aftermath of conflict, the ruins of German cities became environments where survival depended on extreme resourcefulness. Among the forgotten techniques used to endure life in darkened basements was the creation of sludge lamps. When traditional fuel supplies vanished, survivors looked to salvage materials to create light. These improvised lamps utilized discarded grease or fats contained within metal scraps, using fabric remnants as wicks. This method provided a dim but vital glow, allowing families to navigate hazardous debris. Such ingenuity highlights the historical resilience of civilians who turned overlooked waste into essential tools for survival amidst total urban devastation. Moving forward, we look at another survival move, which was the subterranean draft control. As firestorms raged through bombed German cities, the greatest threat to sheltered civilians was often not the heat, but the air itself. To prevent fires from consuming all underground oxygen, survivors mastered subterranean draft control. By strategically opening or sealing basement vents, doors, and breached walls, civilians manipulated air currents with connected bunker networks. This tactical airflow management blocked toxic carbon monoxide and heavy smoke from rushing into occupied cellars. Controlling these delicate underground atmospheric pressures kept life-saving oxygen pockets intact, proving that survival in the ruins required conquering the invisible currents of fluid dynamics amidst the chaos above. Still on heat and light, let's move on to the next survival technique, which is newspaper briquettes. In the decimated landscapes of wartime German cities, surviving the brutal winters required extraordinary resourcefulness. Amidst the rubble, coal and wood became luxuries, forcing civilians to turn to newspaper briquettes as a primary heat source. Utilizing the abundance of discarded paper and archives, families developed methods to transform fragile sheets into dense combustible blocks. These makeshift briquettes were valued for their slow-burning properties, providing essential warmth in damp air-raid shelters. This practice stands as a testament to human resilience, demonstrating how repurposed materials became vital tools for survival when traditional infrastructure had completely collapsed. On the last part of Heat and Light, let's dive into cold dust reconstitution as our 15th survival technique. Amidst the pulverized ruins of bombed German cities, standard fuel reserves vanished, forcing civilians to master the resourcefulness of coal dust reconstitution. When heavy bombardments shattered commercial coal supplies into unusable debris, survivors sought ways to prevent energy waste. Civilians gathered fine black dust from cellars and rail yards, blending it with available materials to create compact fuel blocks. Hand-pressed into molds, these improvised briquettes provided a necessary heat source that burned more efficiently than scarce wood. This historical recycling technique represents a vital adaptation to extreme scarcity, helping to warm subterranean shelters during periods of intense industrial and social collapse. It's so important, yet if you didn't watch this video, you might have missed it. To ensure that doesn't happen, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Moving on, we take a look at an important survival sector, which is food and nutrition. In this sector, we take a look at our next survival technique, which is cellar gardening. Amid the darkness of bombed German cities, cellar gardening emerged as a vital subterranean adaptation against starvation. With traditional plots buried under toxic rubble, resourceful civilians converted dim basement shelters into makeshift agricultural chambers. Recognizing that certain crops could grow in low light, families cultivated fast-growing root vegetables like turnips and chicory directly in shallow boxes of salvaged soil. Nourished by cellar humidity and residual warmth, these hidden gardens yielded essential vitamins. This remarkable agricultural improvisation transformed dark bomb shelters into vibrant sources of nourishment and hope during wartime. Quickly, on to the next technique is dandelion green preservation. What is it about? Amidst the pulverized ruins of bombed German cities, starvation forced civilians to look for nature for immediate sustenance, elevating dandelion green preservation to a vital survival technique. Recognizing the high vitamin content of resilient dandelions growing through cracked pavements, families harvested these bitter weeds before urban areas withered. To prevent spoilage in dark, unrefrigerated basement shelters, survivors packed the greens tightly into jars with layers of coarse salt or pickled them in salvaged vinegar. This resourceful preservation method provided essential nutrients during bleak winters, turning a common weed into a life-saving dietary staple. The 18th survival technique used for survival was the meat canning. When Allied bombardments killed livestock and workhorses in the streets of German cities, civilians faced a critical race against spoilage. Amidst the chaos, immediate meat preservation became a vital survival imperative. Resourceful citizens quickly butchered the fallen animals and packed the meat into jars or cans. Utilizing available heat sources, they processed the containers for hours to sterilize the content and create seals. This swift preservation technique secured a crucial source of protein and fat, turning a sudden urban tragedy into a long-term lifeline against starvation during the conflict. The next survival technique on the list is foraging pigeons. In the devastated landscape of bombed German cities, surviving the threat of starvation required absolute resourcefulness. As conventional food supplies vanished, civilians turned to foraging urban pigeons as a critical source of protein. Once regarded as mere city pests, these resilient birds became a vital lifeline for families trapped in subterranean shelters. Utilizing basic traps made from salvaged wire, boxes, and breadcrumbs, resourceful citizens captured pigeons amid the rubble. This desperate foraging technique provided essential fats and nutrients, sustaining thousands when markets lay in ruins. On the last part of food and nutrition during survival, let's look at bark flour. Amidst the devastating famine in bombed German cities, bark flour became a vital survival food. When Allied air raids severed supply lines and traditional grains vanished, civilians looked to the inner bark or cambium of birch and pine trees. Resourceful survivors carefully scraped, dried, and ground this fibrous layer into a fine powder. Mixed with scarce wheat flour or sawdust, this bitter additive extended the volume of bread dough, providing essential fiber and carbs that staved off immediate starvation. Quickly, let's move on to our last sector, health and first aid, and onto our next technique, which is sugar wound packs. During the final years of World War II, the destruction of infrastructure in bombed German cities forced a return to forgotten survival techniques. One notable emergency measure was the use of granulated sugar in wound care. When traditional medical supplies were exhausted, sugar was utilized for its osmotic properties, which helped manage infections in dire circumstances. While these methods highlight the desperation and resourcefulness of civilians in ruined cities, they remain historical examples of extreme emergency survival rather than modern medical practices. The next survival technique is the soot salves. In the ruins of bombed German cities, medical infrastructure collapsed, forcing civilians to rely on improvised medicine. Among these forgotten survival techniques was the creation of soot salves. When sterile ointments vanished, survivors combined fine carbon-rich soot from burned structures with available fats like lard or petroleum jelly. Historically used for its mild astringent and protective qualities, this makeshift salve was applied to minor burns and abrasions to form a barrier against contaminants. It remains a stark testament to wartime resourcefulness. With that, let's quickly proceed to the next technique, crushed charcoal poultices. During the final years of World War II, the destruction of infrastructure in bombed cities led to a resurgence of traditional survival methods. As medical supplies became scarce, residents turned to historical knowledge to manage health and hygiene in extreme conditions. These forgotten techniques reflect the resilience of civilians forced to adapt within devastated urban environments. Studying these methods provides insight into how populations navigated the collapse of modern systems while relying on basic materials found within the ruins of their own cities. Moving on, let's proceed to the next as we look at moss dressing. During the extreme hardships in bombed German cities, the scarcity of medical supplies led to a rediscovery of historical botanical knowledge. Survivors researched the properties of sphagnum moss, which was historically noted for its high absorbency. While documenting these forgotten survival techniques reflects the desperation of the era, modern medical standards emphasize the necessity of sterile, professional supplies for wound care. On to our last survival technique, let's look at splinting with debris. When Allied bombs fractured German cities, the medical infrastructure collapsed, leaving thousands injured amid the ruins. With professional splints unavailable, survivors innovated splinting with debris. Resourceful civilians salvaged sturdy wooden window frames, straight metal piping, or thick wire mesh from collapsed buildings to immobilize broken bones. Bound tightly with torn clothing, this primitive engineering prevented permanent nerve damage in devastated environments. From underground shelters to ingenious ration hacks, these forgotten survival techniques reveal the resilience of ordinary people trapped in devastation. History's darkest moments often uncovered humanity's most extraordinary instincts for survival.